morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I will quickly run through this. Hope I will not make it boring. In the session on TVET excellence, what we wanted to share from UNESCO New Delhi is what we intend to do. Quick background. I'm sure most of you know UNESCO, and the cluster office in New Delhi is looking after 6 countries, including India, of course. We happen to be headquartered in New Delhi, but we have a South Asian perspective. So I will share how we are, and the office is 70 years old almost, and this is the first time that we have a dedicated focus. As you know, UNESCO globally is the custodian of SDG 4. We report on the progress, and the education mandate under SDG 4 is quite vast, from early childhood all the way. And technical and vocational education certainly deserves more attention, and I think in that light, it's great that now we are focusing on TVET as part of the cluster office. So very quickly, what are we aiming to do? And I will try and connect it with TVET excellence. So how are we going to foster excellence in the field of TVET? 3 things really. First, as you know, UNESCO helps in policy review and works with government and the national agencies to put key policy mandates on the agenda, recommendations, and policy improvements. So that's the first, continuous policy development, and I will share how we intend to do it. Second is capacity building. It's very important. I think enough has been said about how policies, a lot of policies already exist, but we need to move towards how to implement on the ground. It's very, very important, and you will often see that when things hit the ground, it's always about the capacity and the skills of people who are in charge of the implementation. And so capacity development for the TVET leaders, the change makers, many of you are sitting here today who are actually doing things on the ground. That's the second agenda. And third, of course, is practice sharing and cross-learning, which again is very, very important. On the policy review and supporting governments to think through what should be the focus, we are aiming to bring out a flagship publication, the State of the Education Report for 2020, and this year it's going to be focused entirely on technical and vocational education and skills development. This will be really the vehicle for all of us. It is a UNESCO publication, but the inputs will come from all quarters, from academia, from policymakers, from many of you who run skilling programs on the ground. And this publication will not only celebrate and look at the good work that's been done. You know, the Indian skills ecosystem is changing very fast, and the report will take stock of what's happened and clearly chart out recommendations for the Indian government. And here, I think it's important to mention that it would, of course, involve and work with the Ministry of Skills, but also with the Ministry of Human Resource Development, because convergence cannot be done unless all ministries come together. Issues like vocationalization of school education or higher education cannot be done alone by any ministry. So the State of the Education Report is going to be the vehicle for putting forth key recommendations, bringing out gaps but with solutions, so critical but constructive. That's what we are aiming to do, and I would urge all of you to meet with us, and if you have any ideas on what should be, we are in the process of creating the draft, and we welcome inputs. I think it would be great to hear more during the course of the day, also individually. The chief of the office and head of education sector, Omar, is here, my colleague, and I really would want all of you to share both with me and Omar your inputs on what we could possibly highlight here. I will not go into the details of the report because obviously it spans from how entrepreneurship can be linked better with TVET to vocationalization to quality assurance and a lot of things, inclusion, equity, all of the things that you already know. But I just want to emphasize that this is a very important report and it would help the entire ecosystem to clearly help the government to take action through our recommendations. And we will work with all our partners, with the ministries, with NSTC, with PSSCIVE to bring it out. So that's the first thing. Second, I mentioned capacity building, and we are aiming clearly to organize a TVET leadership program. This is a global format that UNESCO UNIVOC has thankfully created, and now our job is to bring it to South Asia and to actually work with the change makers. And Dr. Majumdar is here. I think a lot has been done to create this format already by UNIVOC, and we really want to work, contextualize it for South Asia and use this as a tool to build capacity of the TVET leaders who are working at state level in skilled missions, in policy and implementing organizations. So this is the second concrete way for us. Again, we'll deliver this in partnership with our existing UNIVOC network members. And third, of course, the opportunity for practice sharing and cross-learning. It's very, very important. Again, like I mentioned earlier, we have a cluster outlook. And I think it's a great opportunity for countries, at least in South Asian region, to begin with, to learn from each other. And that's what we are going to do through this TVET cluster, activating the cluster for South Asia, and use this, build a mechanism for cross-learning. This is really the third key initiative through which we are hoping to foster TVET excellence. And we have, of course, really the idea is to have several streams of work, starting with ICT in TVET to social and emotional learning. I think there has been enough focus and it will continue on life skills, but I think building social and emotional learning in TVET is something that we are hoping to push. Clearly, use of technology and ICT, improving labor market outcomes through entrepreneurship linkage with TVET, and so on and so forth. So, of course, greening, which I believe Dr. Khambayat will cover later in the session. We have begun in India, but we have much more to do in greening. So these are, and same is the case with many of our cluster countries. So we will use this cross-learning platform to push more and really enable countries to learn from each other, not only UNESCO enabling, but really countries coming together to share what they're doing. So these are three concrete ways in which we are aiming to foster excellence. And this will be a participatory process with all of you. So I'm, of course, very excited to be here. We will be available through the day. Please come and talk to us, and all your ideas are welcome. Yeah, thank you.